My coworker who leaves me to go and have fun in the sun, but he always tends to hang out and be around. That's our very own Dr. Douglas Graham. Dr. Graham?
Hey, Nikki, I just want to give you an update on the weather report. We've had lots of rain, so I'm not getting all the sunshine that I'd like to get. All right. I'm a retired physician. I spent 30 years working in the western suburbs and 2 years working in the representative's office in Washington, D.C. It was an astonishing and enlightening experience. It's an honor to be here with my panelists. I'm going to try and answer your questions if I can.
Outstanding, outstanding. To the man who says I threaten him to be here on every Monday, but he tends to be here on time. That's our very own Dr. James Miller. Dr. Miller?
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here with my distinguished co-panels. And, we want to be able to stimulate, motivate, and to help to provide some information that's going to be useful and to people's health and longevity and healing of our community.
Outstanding, outstanding. Well, Dr. Mason, the urologist of the stars, there is something right in front of your face. So I want you to introduce yourself, but there is something right in front of your face.
I have no idea what it is.
Something's leaning over on your screen. Is there something leaning over on your screen?
Did it go away?
It did.
There you go. It's all gone.
Yeah, I think it's a light that went out while we were waiting. That's why I hear my mouth was going on and off. But first of all, thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Congressman, for providing us with this opportunity. And I'm hopeful that we will be able to impart something that you will find of value tonight.
Great. Absolutely fantastic. To that doctor that they call Dr. 100, who always keeps it real, that's our very own Dr. Maya Green. Dr. Green?
Hello, community. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Congressman, for having this space. Hello out there to all the community and my esteemed colleagues. It's spring. I'm excited to talk about all the things spring brings and learn from the colleagues today. So thanks for having me.
Outstanding. I want to say hey to Sister Bonnie, who's here with us. She says good evening to everyone. To Mimi, who is here, the fashion designer of the stars. Hey, Mimi. She says hello to everyone. And she's also texting hello to her favorite congressman. That's Congressman Danny K. Davis.
We like that.
To the chef by night, that's our very own Dr. Tony Hampton. Dr. Hampton?
Absolutely happy to be here. Happy spring is finally here in Chicago. So I've really been enjoying that as well. Obesity doc, family doc, and additional training in nutrition. Happy to be here and happy to answer any questions I can.
Outstanding. To the doctor who loves those Maltese. That's her favorite, her very own little baby, fur mommy, that is, Dr. Sylvia Robinson. Dr. Robinson?
Good evening, everyone. I am so thankful to be here. Thank you, Congressman Davis and Nikki, for having me. And thank you to all our esteemed panelists and the wisdom they're going to impart today. I'm an internal medicine and pediatrics doctor with also peds endocrinology training with an interest in health equity and obesity. Happy to be here and answer any questions that I can.
Outstanding, outstanding. To the art connoisseur who gets it all done, that's our very own Joseph Harrington. Joe Harrington?
Well, thank you very much, Eve, Nikki, and I want to thank all my esteemed colleagues as well. I learn something from them every week. It's great to be here again. My background is primarily in healthcare and public health, spent most of my time in public health, retired in 2017 as a regional health officer for Cook County.
And to the man who makes this possible for us every Monday night, to the one who truly teaches us that health is wealth, our vanguard on healthcare, our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, Congressman Danny K. Davis.
Well, thank you all. It's good to be here the day after Easter. I had a great Resurrection Day dinner at a Black-owned restaurant out in the in the mall in Forest Park, Illinois, where Reverend Bill Winston and his outfit holds forth and where they have developed this gorgeous restaurant called The Harvest. And so I guess they harvest everything and then bring it there and do something good with it. So I had a marvelous time having my Easter dinner. But I'm also excited because I think the idea of Chicago becoming a healthier city, the possibility of it, the notion that it can. And so I'm pretty excited because we have a new chief executive who's going to be coming on board. And I think he'd like to listen to people like yourselves. I found him to be very open to recommendations and suggestions and things that people want to tell him that he ought to do. I had a great conversation with him on Saturday, and I am tremendously impressed and think he's just going to be great for the city of Chicago. So I'm looking forward to the emergence of a health plan that's going to function to help Chicago become a healthier city. I know that we talk individually and we deal everything with me begins with self. You know, I believe so and so and so. I pledge my head, my heart, my hands, my health. It's always I. And we put all of those I's together and we become a collective. And I'd like to ask one question, and any other questions and all are great. And the question I want to ask is, how do we improve the health status of Chicago, Illinois? Our city, city of the big shoulders, my kind of town. And if we can somehow raise the health status of our city as a whole, which is something that ever since I got interested in public health has been a big part of my thinking. Health status. How do we elevate it and what must we do? So thank you all for being here and being a part of this. And I'm just waiting for Chicago to become a healthier city. And I want to know, what must we do in order to make that happen?
Okay. So, Dr. Green, I understand you wanted to start our topic tonight. Go right ahead.
Sure. So, you know me, I always kind of wait because I got a long list of things that we can definitely do. But definitely, when you look at even Healthy Chicago, the recognition that there is a gap, a disparity. So, if you want to raise the overall status, it has to be none of us without all of us, right? So we have to look at the areas where that gap is. The life expectancy gap, which the congressman kind of alluded to, the nutrition gap, right? The infant mortality gap, all the gaps that are there, and start to infuse equity into those spaces. And equity looks like education, it looks like kind of nutrition. You know, the quickest way to do it is to change the nutrition around the place and kind of what's available. But also, it looks like changing the wealth gap, because if you change the quality of life, then a lot of times I find patients are more incentivized to make those changes. So I think, I mean, I got a long list, but I like to, you know me, I'll go all day. I'll stop right there and let some of the other colleagues just start the discussion. But you have to start with, you cannot change it without looking at the gaps. And none of us without all of us is what, you know. And I think Healthier Chicago starts with a healthier for everybody, a healthier me, a healthier you. And so that's where I want to start. But there's so many other topics we can get to on that. So.
Yeah, I've listened to Brandon Johnson speak a lot of times. And I think that that's one of the things that he talks to, maybe not directly, but indirectly, because he does talk about the quality of life in certain neighborhoods and uplifting those neighborhoods. And if you can improve the quality of life, you'll not only improve the quantity of life, but you'll improve the health status of the people that live in those neighborhoods. And I don't think anybody that's tuning in and anybody that's a part of this panel doesn't know which neighborhoods those are. Some of us grew up in those neighborhoods, so we know very well what it was like when we were growing up. And the unfortunate thing is many of those neighborhoods haven't changed. In fact, they've gotten worse over time. So it's very difficult for people to have a good quality of life and quantity of life if they live in a neighborhood that lacks resources. There's very little economic opportunity. The schools may not be the best. And so you see the problems that we have in this city. I've described it as, particularly some neighborhoods, as a mashup of two famous novels, Lord of the Flies and A Tale of Two Cities. That's what we see going on in several neighborhoods all over the city of Chicago, all at the same time.
And you know, well, okay. Well, you know, also when you kind of look at that kind of stuff, I love what you're saying, because when you look at social determinants of health, you have to, neighborhoods are something you have to look at. Economic stability, neighborhoods, food, meaning nutrition access, right? Not just kind of any food, and not to knock it, not only, but food that's going to feed and sustain your bodies, right? And you have to put more of it around so that people are likely to choose it. How people are viewed in community and social context. Of course, there is the healthcare delivery system, but it's also important to fix what a person experiences for the 23 hours and 45 minutes they're not sitting in a healthcare visit. And then we can't forget about education. I'm a former CPS teacher, you know, can't ever forget about education, because that kind of sets our youth and ourselves, those of us that are in our second youth, but that sets us up for long-term success. The education definitely has to be part of it. And when you infuse equity into every one of those aspects at every stage, so you just can't infuse it into kindergarten and not infuse it into secondary education, and not infuse it into healthcare education, and not infuse it into adult and elder education. You have to infuse that equity and make it available in ways people can understand, you know, in their environment, not just in some neighborhoods. And once you continually do that, you know, I think over time you do see, like Joseph Harrington said, you do see quality, quantity, everything, and all of that is what it looks like to change a healthy status in Chicago and anywhere.
I think that when we talk about health, we talk about a healthy body, which is very important, but you also got to have healthy in terms of the economy, got to be a healthy economy in those particular areas. We have to have, healthy food to provide and maintain a healthy body. And we have to look at those things that cause poor health and deal with them in the sense that we need to alleviate some things that people that are causing people health to fail. If they're not eating appropriately, if the food that they need to have a healthy body is not available to them, if just the being able to seek the proper management and monitoring of their body's health status is not available to them or is not something that they can afford, those are things that cause us not to have. So we have to make sure that those elements are there, present, and available to everybody in order to be able to have a good, healthy city. Because we're talking about a city. When we say a city, we're talking about everybody. And we know that there are going to be diseases, and diseases attack those that are sick already the worst, tend to do worse with them. So if you already, entered the process because you didn't have the proper nutrition, then you're already at a disadvantage in terms of being able to reach the health status and maintain that health status that you desire.
Reverend
You know,
Miller, you said,
I would add to that. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, go, because I.
Yeah. No, the only thing I was going to say is a couple of things. Number one, first of all, we have to agree on what do we mean when we say health. And I think of health in 3 dimensions. I think of it as mental, spiritual, and physical. And too often we tend to put it in one box, and that's the physical box. And I think we need to rethink that, because we have to think about how do we recreate healthy families? Because the family unit is the microcosm of that entire community. So we need to think about that. That's a conversation. The second thing I would say, and Mari Gallagher, when she did that study talking about food deserts she released that study in 2010. And she showed the differences in life expectancy based on the availability or proximity of good places to buy food from those who had to go far away to get good food. But what we did, we took that one step further, because this is the part nobody talks about. We not only have food deserts, we have what I call appetite deserts. And an appetite desert is when a community has been bereft of the right kinds of food choices. Even when we went in, when I was at the Department of Public Health at the county, even when we went in to bring in the better foods, greens and that kind of stuff, if people didn't know how to cook them, if people didn't know, just what to do with it, how to even prepare them to be washed and things like that, or knew that they needed to be washed, there's some fundamental things that we have to get to. And then, of course, there's a value proposition for sickness in our community. There's a lot of money to be made in the fact that there's no secret about the plethora of fast food chains and what have you in our community. And so when we don't have a community that cooks, and they don't cook because a lot of times they don't know, we gave people some greens. And they said, well, what are these? And the only ones that really knew were beans. And everybody thinks it costs so much, but it really doesn't. And we really do need to let people know there are economical choices that they can make. And then lastly, dealing just with the stressors of life. And so those are the things that we've got to think about. If you want a healthy community, we have to think about how we're going to deal with those stressors. And I mentioned it last week when we talked about each family. I mean, we had extended families. They weren't extended biological families necessarily, but they were our neighbors. And our neighbors help watch after all of our kids, my kids, your kids, everybody's kids. I don't know how do we bring that back. And we've got to then think about what is the impact and how do we leverage, if possible, the technology that in some cases I think has made things worse, but how can we use it to make it better?
I was going to say well, not exactly, but when Dr. Miller mentioned disease, talking about what it looks like if you break it down. I remember I was in medical school, I think, and I was reading something that was talking about disease. And that's the first time I saw that it also meant dis-ease. So it's not only the physical aspects of it, but it's the dis-ease that it brings to that individual and those around. And which comes first? That's a conversation to have. Is it a dis-ease or the disease that comes first, or which one sets? And I think it's just a cycle that we have to break. And then kind of looking around, what does it look like for our communities to be whole? One of the things I learned about Initially, some of you all know I started my career as a HIV specialist. I just, focused on HIV, the virus. That's what I was focusing on. And I quickly understood that if you just focus there, we can't get anywhere. You have to focus on communities impacted and the stigma, and you have to address and support people so to where their quality of life increases, but their dis-ease regarding everything around that decreases.
Yeah, I wanted to offer up a definition for health because you asked how do we define health, and Dr. Mason and I have used this definition that comes out of the Center for African American Health Status Report, and this was done in 2002. But actually, the Center for African American Health, that doesn't exist anymore, actually started out and was based out of Roseland Hospital on the south side of Chicago. And their definition of health was the behavioral, cultural, economic, educational, physical, and spiritual state of being in which individuals have the ability to enjoy life and contribute positively to their family, community, and society. So the last part of that for me has always been the most cogent part, because if you don't have the ability to enjoy life and contribute positively to your family and society, then you're not a healthy person. And so most definitions of health don't look at the role of the individual in terms of health as well. And so that's why we need healthy communities, because we need everybody to be at that point.
Seems to me you're talking about, to a great extent, education in terms of what people learn and how it becomes a natural part of their being. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily thought of as something extra or something that's outside the realm of what is called normalcy, mm-hmm. where it's normal to do certain things. And so I wanted to ask Dr. Robinson, in terms of children, young people, is there a way of stimulating them as they are growing up to want to pay serious attention to their health? I mean, I remember when I was taught that if you wanted to be healthy a certain way, it had to do with some of the things that you ate and whether you was going to be a whistler or a whiner. And they used to tell us that an apple a day would keep the doctor away. And, I remember that when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I've always thought, I didn't know why, but I always thought that eating an apple had something to do with helping you to be healthy. So, Dr. Robinson, how would you respond to that?
So I'm thankful that that question is kind of along the lines of what I was thinking anyway, in terms of what I wanted to share, which is I think in order to build community and health, we have to first establish that trust, right? You can get all the information in the world from someone who's an expert. If you don't trust them, or it's not delivered in a way that is useful to you, then it doesn't matter all the knowledge that you give them. So we have to first try and decrease some of the mistrust that's there, and work to, I guess, show that, everybody, that we're all for supporting the community, and including, I think, shared decision making is a big part of it too. It's give and take. You have to be willing maybe to try some things, as long as it's not going to put their life in danger, right? That maybe might not necessarily be your best thought, but sometimes you have to give people that opportunity to kind of think and look into things before necessarily getting the buy-in from them to, you know, kind of earn that trust.
And
Well, I'm sure that the new mayor is going to be looking at everything that he's got to look at. And I'm pretty sure he's going to look at what the city does for health. I'm sure. So I sure would hope that he would put some of y'all on his transition group to help look at these things and help determine. You know, in the poker game, we always say you got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, when to walk away, and when to run. And so I'm sure he's going to look at what is in existence and then make some determination about what he might keep, what he might change, what he might add, what he might do to help get to where he wants to get relative to health. And I certainly hope that the thinking that I've heard coming from this panel or this group would be infused somehow or another into his reestablishment of what his health program for the city ought to be.
Yeah, we have to model for our kids. I think about how unfair it is that my kids have a doctor and a pharmacist to model for them what success can look like. And I thank God that we have a mayor who can model what maybe a young Black male child can see, what's possible for them as well. And so first thing we have to do is continue to put in front of our young people what success can look like, whether it's a doctor, a lawyer, or even an athlete or a singer. It's okay to do those things as well. And then we have to be honest about why we don't have a lot of models in the world to do that. And I know that, last time I checked, there was only 3% of the medical school, entry level people, they were Black men, for example, just as an example. But we know from at least get to the population level where, if we're 13, 14, 15% of the population, can we at least get to that? And then if we can do that, then we can then have models of what our babies can do one day. As it relates to the education piece that Dr. Meyer was speaking to, it's not just the patients and the community that we need to educate. We even have to make sure the clinicians are educated, not just about how to prescribe penicillin, but how do we look at someone in front of us and understand they may have social determinants of health issues that I need to address before I start talking about nutrition. Can they even afford the prescription that I just wrote? And you're saying, well, they used to use the word compliant. Well, we use the word adherence now, but how are you going to pay for the medicine if the copay is more than you're bringing home? It's beyond your budget. And then we look at the patient and point fingers at them. And the other thing we have to educate our new doctors about is let's understand why they're sick in the first place. Some of it is the social determinants of health issues, right? But some of it is also understanding, why did I have a high blood pressure in the first place? Maybe because I'm in a stressful relationship. Maybe because I'm stressed because I'm working 2 jobs, and one of those jobs got me working all night long. And just coming in after that is going to have a high blood pressure. And what really frustrates me the most, and I know the mayor can't fix all of this, but why is it that if I have a diabetic with retinopathy and neuropathy and nephropathy and all of these complications, and they just happen to have a high blood pressure, and they just happen to have, the more diagnoses they have, I get paid more money. On one hand, that's fair because they're sicker and they require more care. But if I take that same patient and I change their diet and I get them to exercise, and now all of a sudden I can take some of these diagnoses off their chart, I get paid less money to heal them. There's something wrong when we live in a world where I can help heal people and I get paid less money to do that. So I just think that we have a lot of issues in society we have to start thinking about. What I like about the mayor, and I'm an Oak Park guy, so I didn't follow it extremely closely, but what I liked about him is that he always spoke about what are the needs of the people. And although I don't want to punish a business, I don't want to punish industry, but please, can somebody talk about the needs of the people and start putting things in place for those folks? They need bailouts too. Can we bail out some regular folk who have basic needs? And those are the things that I think that I'm hoping the new mayor will at least make an effort to address. And if he does that, I think that we'll be far further down the road than we've ever been. And so I'm very optimistic when I heard him speak. I like what he was saying. It was the right messaging. And we just got to now pretty much have a revolution. We have to fight alongside this mayor and say, we want these same things that you're talking about. What can we do to assist you?
Yeah, I want to push back on a couple of things. One, when you talked about what you said, why in the world do you get paid less? I just want to narrow it down. Why it is in the richest country in the world do you get paid less for making a patient well? I just want to provide a broader context. You know, that in a third world nation, you might have the same issue and it'd be harder to understand. But in the richest, the wealthiest nation, supposedly, and that's what we call ourselves on the planet, why is that the scenario? The other thing is, I want to be fair to the incoming mayor. He like us, he's a person, he's a man. There's only so much he can do. And we have very high expectations for him. And I think we need to maybe adjust those expectations. And I'll use this because I thought about bringing it up earlier. I read this study, it's probably about 20 years ago. They looked at cancer in a small rural area. And what was interesting, that they didn't find the same types of gaps in health that they see in large urban areas. And what they attributed it to is the fact that in small geographic areas, everybody goes to the same hospitals, everybody goes to the same stores, everybody pretty much, whether you got money or you don't, pretty much have a similar quality of life. We're in a city of close to well over 2 million people, maybe 2.5 million people. That's a different scenario. So I don't want us to put too much on the young mayor's plate too soon. What I'm encouraged by, and we have to take some responsibility for this, is my understanding that he got 87% of the Black vote. We have an obligation to support this mayor and make sure he's successful. So I don't want to put it all on his shoulders. I want to push it back and say, we have a responsibility too. Those of us that know better are doing better, and we're trying to inform people to do it. And everybody that's listening to this program, if they're Black like me or African American, then they have an obligation and a responsibility to support this mayor and to make sure that this mayor is successful.
You know, Joe, to your point, I think, and I'll be very brief, one of the things that I see that is sometimes bereft in some of our policies, and that is, we need to think about, how do we strengthen families? What do families need in order for them to be able to function as a family beyond just a living wage and some of the things that even in people who are very highly skilled, like, excuse me, like the physicians on this panel, myself included. We need to think about, because what is a neighborhood? It's made up of people. And usually these are people and families. And the one thing that I would say is that what made my neighborhood a neighborhood in Inglewood when I was growing up is that we saw ourselves as a big family. And wasn't that everybody was in everybody's business per se, but it was because we shared a value. We had block clubs. So to make sure the grass was all cut and the snow was removed, and that everybody during Christmas time put their little stars out. I mean, there were activities, things that happened that brought us together. We had neighborhood stores where many of the children, that including myself, got their first jobs at some of these places. So a neighbor, that the things that we need to do, whatever policies that we're going to support, really, in my mind, have to support families. And I think some mentioned already about the woman who's got to work and the single parent family. And in the days that I was growing up, there was always an auntie, a grandmother, somebody that was there to help fill some of those gaps, including cooking, if that were necessary. So I just think that we don't want to overthink this, but there are some simple things that if we sat down and listened to some of the seniors in our churches, they'd give us a lot.
You know,
Well,
one of the things that go ahead.
yeah, there are a lot of creative ways that people can do things, and trying to balance. You know, Joe raised a question and an issue. I mean, we're so much of a capitalistic society that, and we always say that each person learns how to maneuver, manipulate, and deal with that society to extract from it what they individually need. And that's part of the challenge of living in a capitalistic society. I mean, it's true that if you take care, and we hear these stories. I remember when I was a kid, I heard a story about going to law school, and this preacher told a joke, and he say, one fellow sent his son off to law school, and he finally decided to take a vacation after his son got there, and he turned the practice over to him. And he say, when he got back, his son told him, said, Daddy, you know that case you've been working on for the last 15, 20 years, that Jones case? He said, yeah. He said, I solved it. He said, you know that Smith case you've been working on for about 7 years? He says, I solved it. His daddy began to worry. He said, you solved it? Yeah, you've been. He said, do you know that that case sent you to college? That other case sent you to medical school. And I was getting ready to buy you a car for your wedding present. But you know, I already messed that one up. So you get that. And so this notion of capitalism and what it actually means in terms of everybody trying to get as much from it as they possibly can. And it takes the rest of society to be the balance to keep anybody else from over exploiting us so that they get much more than they should and need to have. And the rest of us don't get as much. And we argue that, of course, every day. And much of the time, the folks up here carry the day, as opposed to the folks down here who are trying to get up here. And that's the big battle that we fight and have to fight. And there's no way around it except to fight it and feel comfortable doing it in terms of knowing that the only way to create the kind of society or the kind of world that we want is to have a different outcome for these battles. And whoever win them, that is the direction society goes. And so this notion of being not necessarily altruistic, but just trying to get your fair share of what's out there to get and fight for it and do it. I don't see any other approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think with that, oh, great. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, the issues that seem to be showing up in this discussion that we're not really calling it, but it is having healthy relationship with one another in our community, in our city, in our country. I think if we begin to have those healthy relationships, healthy mean relationships that are good for everybody. That the whole, if I look at my body as a whole, if I got a bad leg, it's going to affect the rest of my ability to perform whatever it is that I'm trying to perform. So healthy relationships makes it allows us to be able to look at others and to make certain that we don't just look at what we need, but also what our neighbor need, what our friends need, what our relatives need. And, we can store up. And when we store up that which we're not going to use, that means that maybe someone else who is in dire stress or in dire need is denied the opportunity to have that to meet their basic need. So when we have good relationships, we're able to look beyond those things that are just for us, but we have the ability to feel the pain and the discomfort and the suffering of those that are around us. That's that comes with healthy relationships, and I think that's important. And if we want to have a healthy city, regardless of all these other things, I mean, some of the bigger problems that we have with violence and all these other things, healthy relationships is going to begin to address these kinds of issues. When we are not concerned about those that don't have the opportunities, don't have the adequate education, don't have the proper health care. Again, if we have the right relationship with them, we are going to begin to look beyond ourselves and see their needs and try to make certain that we pull them with us as opposed to just going by ourselves.
And then I think in some instances, allowing, I always say there's a difference between telling members of the community you can have a seat at the table and us going and sitting at their tables. Because a solution, as you spoke, I would say Dr. Reverend Miller, because it really invokes something, a truth, which is you've never in history seen a historically underserved or oppressed community come out of that into what we're talking about through the efforts of someone else. So the solutions to what ails our communities, however we want to practice, and we know people are a part of multiple communities, come from within the community. So that's why we can't have the same, like, hey, what's healthy here? We have to move to equity, yes, but we have to understand from the community members what equity looks like. And that's not we don't want that, forever lag where we start paying, non-minoritized institutions to study the problems of people we deem minoritized. We don't want that. Like, we're trying to understand for 10 years. We don't want that. We want understanding, sitting at the community's table once, kind of like what Dr. Robinson said, they've invited us once they trust us and using those trusted resources, which we saw a lot of that during COVID, right? Those healthcare providers that say, Oh, you want me to get the essential? You said you want me to contact the essential people first? Okay, I'm gonna contact the pastors because those, because once we get those people vaccinated, then I can get a whole congregation vaccinated, and understanding how community, whether we acknowledge it or not, we still move in tribes, and finding out what that means, hearing from the tribe, and then being quick to action, because our communities have seen for a long time this talk about understanding more, and that's just our pathological way of American, pathological way of lagging, on impact. And so being able to listen individually to communities and being able to act on impact, equity impact, I think is key.
Joe,
somebody,
go ahead, Congressman. And then Joe Harrington. Go ahead, Congressman.
And it just went over in my mind that 87% of African Americans in the town voted for one guy. Suppose 87% of African Americans who bought a pair of shoes could buy them from African Americans. If 87% of the African Americans who went grocery shopping could buy it from African Americans, I think that would change the economics of some places. Oh, wouldn't that not change the economics? And I often say that we've made more progress in politics than we have in economics. When I look at the setup. And so we put a lot of effort into politics. That's one of the reasons that we've made the progress. And maybe we've got to increase our understanding and participation in the economics of the environment of which we are part, if we're going to be able to change the health status. I'm saying, and so maybe there has to be some combination. For example, the lowest home ownership among people in Chicago are African Americans. The highest school dropout rates are African American boys. The highest penitentiary rates are African American men. So, and economics drive a lot of this. I'm saying a lot of this is driven by economics. So somehow or another, integrating economic thought with health thought may be an approach that we need to seriously look at if we're going to be able to change health status. Because it does seem that people who reach certain levels live a little bit longer, live a little differently, are not as sick as others. And so that may be some school for thought.
We already have some of that. I mean, in our health system, we have, Medicare Advantage, right? So with that model, as I echoed earlier, we do get paid to a certain extent to keep people healthy. So it kind of goes back to incentivizing people. And they have little hooks to get people to come in for their wellness visits and things like that, right? So, but while they're in that wellness visit, we have to kind of figure out, how do we educate people about, why it's so important to do the things we're suggesting so that they can be healthy. But I would even take it as far as how do we educate our voters about the value of knowing the statistic that you just shared. I mean, I did not know 87% of the folk of color voted for the new mayor. And that should empower them to say, you can make a difference. But we can extrapolate that to other areas of their lives, as you suggested. So part of it is educating them, understanding that our current system is flawed. And there's no mystery why it's flawed. It's because we're allowed to let the people with the money influence the people who make the decisions. So we already know why it happens. The question is, will we ever live in a system in our government where that's not true? Now, until that's not true, we have to have grassroots efforts to encourage people in power to then do the things that we feel. I'm kind of a populist. You can be a Republican or a Democrat and be a populist. I just believe what the people want is what's popular. Therefore, we should be fighting for that. And if once people realize they have power, just like with this election, they'll realize there are some things. You can't win everything, but there are some valuable things we can focus on as a community and say, this is an issue that's important to us. Can we fight for that issue as a unit? And then we have to educate everybody about what that is and raise a lot of hell, excuse my French, and then make noise, make people aware, make noise, because the reality is I'm a busy doctor and I have little time to focus on politics. I can only imagine with a single mom with 4 babies and to take care of. She's certainly not focused on politics. So we have to figure out how to reach just enough people, not everybody, to then move the needle towards policies that matter to people. And again, as Joseph suggested, we can't put all of this on one person, right? But if we do it, if we find some common ground that we can move on and hopefully work with the governor and make some changes and get people mobilized and excited, I think we can make change. We've seen it happen. It just requires people to get excited and hopeful. And I think one of the things the mayor should do is focus on get some quick wins, right? You can convince people that you're serious if you can find a few things that you can impact right away that are quick wins, so people can then get excited. Oh my God, this guy is really making a difference. It doesn't have to be major changes, but little things to suggest that I'm with you guys. I want to do things on your behalf. I'm here to represent you and not those large corporations.
You sound like a political strategist.
So I would say to what you just said, Dr. Tony, real quick, and that is, first of all, we got to be honest, and we've not been honest with the population. There is no value proposition for health in America. There is no value proposition that drives that. The value proposition is driven by disease. You and I as physicians, and Dr. Maya and all the other physicians here, were trained to be arbiters of medications and procedures. That's what we're trained to do. We weren't even thought about, it wasn't even the thought to think about all the other dynamics that might be going on in somebody's family. No. And then what we didn't tell the patients is that, yes, I'm going to give you this medicine, but it's not going to cure you. So we have to form a different kind of partnership to tell people, to let the people know the truth, that this stuff isn't going to cure anything. You can take diabetes medication till the cows come home, but you're still going to be diabetic if you don't do some other kinds of things. So we need to be real clear that that's what we're doing, so that people don't have the wrong expectation of what they should expect from us. We can give them good medical management and we can make the numbers better, but that's not going to cure the disease. And that's where I think we fall down. That's one. And then the other thing that very quickly is that this is not easy. And I'm not suggesting that it is, because it goes totally against the grain. And until we get people to understand that there is no health solution without changing food. It's just no health solution there. You cannot, and we've been bombarded by all the major corporations in America to continue to have us eat more food outside of our homes, prepared outside of our homes and inside of our homes, to prepare foods that our taste buds have been manipulated so that we want something oily, crunchy, and salty or sweet. We have our young people now starting to get these drinks with all that whipped cream and stuff, even at very early ages. I won't call the name of that company, but I'm just saying that there are a lot of things that we're not dealing with that we should be telling our populace and trying to figure out how we deal with ways to deal with that and not keep putting it back on that. And lastly, I would say that we need to look critically at whether or not integration was the right strategy for us. Because what did it do to help us strengthen our own institutions? Not much. Daniel Hill Williams started that hospital over there called Providence Hospital to make sure Black physicians had a place to train and nurses had a place to train. And also we gave up our baseball leagues. We gave all our stuff up. For what? And so I would say to Congressman Davis's point, what this election showed is that we have the power if we choose to use it. And we can make better decisions for our community if we voted on behalf of the things that we know could make a difference in our community. And if they were and the politician's job is to engineer those sorts of things so people understand what they are and how we can vote on it to make it better. I've seen too much of it, and I think that we have got to go back. When I was a young kid, we had 6 black automobile dealerships. We had multiple banks. And all of that's gone. Gone. The 200 East 75th Street Medical Building was where we used to go. All Black physicians there. Down the street on 75th Street, 32nd Street, down on Stony Island. Gone. So I don't think we've made any progress. I think we've regressed. And I think that we have to admit that and decide on how we're going to move forward over the next 20 to 30 years.
So you're saying all of that stuff is healthy?
What?
Going to these Black doctors and going to these Black restaurants, shopping with these Black banks, buying cars from these Black dealers. I agree 100%.
My first job was given to me from Meridian, Mississippi.
That's
I want to. There was a question raised earlier about the cost and the availability of Trulicity, and I went online and I did find out what was causing the shortage. And the drug is made by a company, Eli Lilly of Australia, and there's limited availability of Trulicity due to global supply pressures resulting from increased demand. It gets back to an economics thing. Demand has increased the Trulicity, and they can't make it fast enough. And the whole issue of global diabetes, I don't want to get into that, is part of that. But if they can't meet the demand, the only way to meet demand is to increase production. And if you increase production, you're going to increase the cost. That's the economics of healthcare. When you make healthcare a commodity that people buy, and they buy pieces of it here, pieces of it there, you get some insurance, they pay for a little bit, they say, now you got to pay so much. That's the system we're in. And people need to understand the system. The system is not good or bad. It's not evil. It is the system. And we need to do our best to help educate people to how the system operates, help show them how to make the system work for them in the situation that they're in. And as individuals, do the best job we can as clinicians, as public health professionals, as people that are trying to get people healthier, to do the best job we can and keep them informed and do our job. Do what we put on this earth to do.
Nikki, I know we gotta go. Let me know. I'm making my last comment.
All right.
Oh, go.
Come on.
Okay.
Yeah, go.
So that's why it's so important, going back to what Dr. Mason said, and going back to what we really talked about in during COVID, We have to do everything we can do in our communities, grow our own food, do things like that. Because guess what? Guess who doesn't need Trulicity? The people that are growing their own food, the people that are making sure their bodies are healthy, things like that. So why get to, we talk about primary prevention, secondary prevention, and tertiary prevention and preventive health, right? Everything you do to keep tertiary is when you need Trulicity or you're going to have a problem. But what about the primary and secondary things you do to keep yourself from getting to the point where you need Trulicity? You know, so the best thing to do to not get in this system that you're talking about is make sure we stay out of that system and we only access that system when we need it. Absolutely, if it's an absolute. But if we feed our bodies nutrients, if we're staying up to date in our communities and the whole community moves to a point of health, you know, then less people need Trulicity. So keep the, if we're talking about it from a business standpoint, right? We keep the balls in our corner. I'm not demanding it, you know, so, and then for those who need it, it then drives the cost of the product down. Do everything you can to keep yourself out. That's my comment for today. Thank you, Nikki, for giving me the extra time.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Because I know you guys hate to hear me say this, and I see all the stuff chiming in, and people want to say hi to the congressman, and it's been such a robust conversation. So it's that time, guys. It is that time. Mimi, I believe they answered your question when you asked what is happening with your Trulicity medication. I have been trying to get my prescription refilled for 2 months, and Walgreens is out of stock. So I believe they answered your question for you. But of course, you know, if you have any additional questions about it, you can always reach out. Sandra Rowe wants to know, is it possible that we can have more health fair throughout the city and more grassroots activities for you, Sandra? We definitely are. And I have something for you. Kimberly Alexander Jackson says, good evening. Nellie Purnell King says, good evening. Deborah Crable says, good evening. Virginia Knight says, I'm late, but I'm here. Diane Jones says, good evening and amen. She's saying good evening and amen. Audrey Jaycox is here, and she wants to tell everybody hello. Deborah Williams Thurman is here, and she wants to tell everybody hello. Doc Evelyn is here, and she's saying hello to everyone just as well. Barbara Ivory is here, and she's saying good evening. So is Deanna Green. She's here, and she's saying good evening to everyone as well. So amazing that you all give so time attention to the performance. But like the viewers don't know, Yolanda Williams here saying good evening. CEO Wesley is here saying good evening. Marvin C. Glenn is saying amazing information. Linda Johnson is here. She says good evening to everyone. Jack Lynch is here saying good evening to everyone. Natasha Hall says good evening. Healthy relationships are critical, especially in our community, especially in our communities. Bridget Simmons says exactly. On. Tia Banks says great information, awesome panel of professionals. Natasha Hall once again says good points about medical management. Absolutely fantastic. As we always do, we go around really quickly and we ask your until next Mondays. So right before we do that, just want to remind you guys to join our healthcare conversation. Oh, Jack Orloff is here, and he says education about nutrition is essential. Hey, Jack, good to hear from you. You and Jack Lynch. Great to hear from you both. Don't forget our health, our State of Black Health 2023, which will be happening on April 22nd, that's Saturday, April 22nd, from 10 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Want to make sure that you're a part of some of our think tank conversations that we will have at that time. Join us at Build Inc. And Build is at 5100 West on Harrison. That's 5100 West on Harrison on Saturday, April 22nd. Remember, we're going to have some sessions about food is medicine. What's the real nutrition? A Safer Chicago. Is violence in our community a public health issue? Mommy and me aren't doing well. Maternal health and infant mortality. What about preparing to get to zero? HIV and infectious disease. Why are we suffering? The Black Blues, mental health and opioid overdose doctors overview. Let's change the narrative, life expectancy and chronic diseases. And what about growing up in youth adolescence, changing that narrative just as well for all patients who are 16 and under. So don't forget to join us on April 22nd. Once again, I'll be posting that QR code so you can register and that link. It's April 22nd. It is free and open to the public. We want you guys to beat us there. All right, Dr. Robinson, what's your until next Monday?
So can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yes.
My until next Monday is going to be ask questions. Even going back to the earlier question from Mimi, I want to just put out there, if all that you kind of got from the pharmacist was that it's on back order, but nothing else, no possible substitutions or things that you can do in the meantime, please ask questions, reach back out to your doctor, talk to your pharmacist, so that you can get what you need. So just ask questions.
All right. Remember to do what? Ask questions. I often tell you guys, I'm also sometimes the doctor's worst nightmare because I go in and I pull my iPhone out and I go to my notes and I start sharing some information that I want to know about. And I ask those questions. Remember, that's not the place to go and have a closed mouth. This is where your mouth should be open and you should be creating relationships. Dr. Maya Green, you're until next Monday. And you're muted. There you go.
Okay, there you go. I was going to say until next Monday. I was also going to say, keep in mind that if you can't get your medicine, very important. If you can't get your medicine for 2 months, I hope that your provider has you on a different medicine, because it does have to be taken unless they've started you and you're taking your blood sugars on a nutrition intake regimen that's holding and maintaining everything. So there's nutrition intake regimens for some people, and then for some people, they still do need some form of medication or support in addition to the nutrition and activity regimen to sustain that blood sugar. So, and you know, the 2 months may be like, oh, frustrating, but you definitely want to do it not only for this 2 months, because we know you 21 out there, you know, do it for the 70, 80, 90-year-old you. Get that medicine, because it's a progressive process. So every day you take the medicine or every day you stay on your nutrition regimen, whatever's appropriate, you're pulling back and slowing that progression with diabetes. I'm stopped there until next Monday. Thank you.
All right. I want to say hey to Bob Urso, who's here, and he wants the congressman to know that he's watching and he says hello. And also Henry Taylor. Henry Taylor says, hey, they can't wait to come back on. All right. Joe Harrington, you're until next Monday. Joe Harrington, you're until next Monday.
My until next Monday is I should be off mute now. It's a quote that I came across over the weekend. Is by J.P. Morgan. The first step towards getting somewhere is to decide that you are not going to stay where you are. Everybody has a choice. Make a good decision.
All right, Joe, can you text that to me?
I will.
Please.
Okay. Nikki, I'm like,
yeah, text that. Put that in the group text. All right. Dr. Tony Hampton, you're until next Monday.
I just want to just go back to the Trulicity comment. I do want to share with everybody that I'm an obesity doctor, and all these what they call GLP-1 drugs are really revolutionary. And when you, although Trulicity is not Ozempic, Ozempic is one that's been in the news, and Wegovy. So they are revolutionary because they don't increase insulin, they reduce your appetite, they decrease gastric emptying, and they really do help people who struggle with diabetes or weight loss. But as an obesity doctor, I probably have 10 people on these category of medicines. And I want you to put that in context. I see hundreds of people for weight loss, and I have 10 people on these drugs because I've learned that the dietary changes I recommend will also suppress their appetite, will also help them lose weight. So I want to say out loud to everybody that's, looking for these miracle drugs, the miracle has already been with you, and that's making lifestyle changes that will help you get to your goal without the side effects, the stomach aches, the dizziness, the nausea, heartburn, all the things that come with these medicines. By the way, they all have black box warnings because of thyroid tumors. By the way, if you're at risk for pancreatitis, you shouldn't have it. So I tell people, if you're going to do this drug, use it as bridge therapy until you get your lifestyle in order. But it's not the answer. You think 2 out of 3 people who do these drugs will regain the weight back within a year when they stop. And because of this cost issue, guess what? You're forced to stop because they're not making it available. So I just want to make sure everybody understands there's another way. And for some people, they struggle so much, they need help. But most of my patients find that if they change their diet, they'll be fine. So I just want to throw that at you. It's okay to not use those drugs or to just use them as bridge therapy.
All right. Thank you so very much. Douglas Graham. Dr. Graham, what's your until next Monday?
So I wanted to support what Dr. Robinson said, but offer my own personal experience. It helps to talk to the pharmacist, not just the person where you pick up the drugs, but also the pharmacist at your insurance company. And they can help identify for you what drugs you can take as an alternative, what's on the formulary to help you get a medication in case you're short on something. So actually talk to your insurance company pharmacist, because I found them to be very helpful in these sets of circumstances. Oh, and they'll actually call the
All right. Thank you so much.
They'll call your local pharmacy to see if they can get it or what they carry. So they'll just kind of accelerate the process for you.
All right. Dr. James Miller, you're until next Monday.
You know, when we live in a complex society as we do, and we see all these problems that do exist, I think that I want to try to encourage everybody to understand that there is a part that you can play. You don't have to be highly educated to do some simple things that helps to get people together, to care about each other, to care about yourself. And so I think that we want everybody to understand everybody can be part of the solution. And when more people participate in really the right solution, there's a better chance that we will come up and we will be able to carry out the right solution, because the wrong solution for the problem is never going to solve it. So we need everybody to do what it is that you can do, and never feel that there isn't anything that you can do, whether it's your physical health, your mental health, the health of your sisters and brothers. There's things that you can do, and please do those things.
Outstanding. Dr. Terry Mason, you're until next Monday.
Well, again, thank you, Dr. Davis and Nikki, for providing this again. I want to just leave with there's a number of things out there for people who are struggling with diabetes. I've told people about this. I have 4 people who got it and read it, and they're not taking medications anymore. And of course, this is all done under the supervision of their physician. The name of the book is Getting Rid of Diabetes by by Gabriel Cousens. So it's one thing you might want to think about. And also, I want to make sure that my comments around this integration, we need to really think about how we begin, not to close our ranks, but to come together. When I drove the bus for the Chicago Transit Authority during my first year in medical school, I learned that there was something beyond racial segregation. There was ethnic segregation in the city of Chicago. Many communities, the Asians, and not all of them are together, but different groups of Asia has their own little communities with their own signs, their own stores, and everything. And we gave up so much of what we had for, I don't know what for now. So I think that we need to think about what we can do to begin to capitalize more than just on our vote, but in terms of our resources to do the things and help ourselves. Ain't no cavalry coming. If we don't fix it, it ain't gonna get fixed.
All right. Congressman Davis, take us home.
Well, let me just say I'm a type 2 diabetic, and I don't want to reduce my appetite. I want to keep it as much as I can, because my niece came over yesterday evening and brought me some hot water cornbread and turnip greens. She cooks that kind of stuff. But no, it's been a great, great discussion. And given the fact that we talked social health and economic health, and I think that is just as valuable as the scientific health that we need to know about, because all of it is related and it all works together. And so I've really enjoyed the discussion this evening. And so I'll just end, given the fact that yesterday was Easter. And I try to read this book every once in a while. I want to get the one that Dr. Mason just gave us. I want to read that. But I also read another book a little bit. And given the fact that it was the holy day, I'll just end with a little quote that I will butcher. That is, they that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength, and they will mount up like the wings on an eagle. They will run and won't get tired. They will walk and not faint. And so we are the they that they're talking about. And I am so delighted. I didn't know that the percentage of the turnout was exactly as Joe mentioned it. But I'm glad that I'm in that number. that I'm delighted to know that that's the number I was in. And I end with this one. If my people who are called by my name will turn from their wicked ways, humble themselves and pray and seek my face, then they will hear from heaven and I will heal the land. And so it's going to take a lot for the healing that we are seeking and searching for. But I thank all of you for being a part of it, and have a wonderful, wonderful night. We'll see you next week. All right. So long. All right.